The next chapter is the wildlife chapter. This is obviously of great interest to all members of the Tumuk community, given that it relates to the activities of hunting, both in Douglas Treaty traditional territory and elsewhere in the province. Essentially, there is a promise that there will be a right to harvest wildlife that is promised to the First Nation, and that right can be exercised by any citizen of the First Nation. Additionally, there are provisions that say that where a citizen for some reason is unable to hunt, such as they're elderly or sick, measures can be taken to authorize close family members to hunt for them, even if those family members are not part of the community. Harvesting will be subject to safety and public health concerns, and will also be subject to conservation measures, as is the case now. Additionally, the First Nation is given lawmaking power with respect to the treaty rights, and that means that there will be powers to pass laws controlling how the treaty rights are exercised, who can exercise the treaty rights, and to generally ensure that the First Nation citizens comply with any conservation measures or public health and safety measures. The treaty rights will be exercised in an area that's defined on a map. That map has yet to be negotiated, and there's obviously a large disagreement between the government and us as to how big that map will be. But even outside that area, there are provisions in the wildlife chapter that allow for hunting, provided that there is the proper consent obtained from the First Nation in whose territory you propose to hunt. Exactly how those sections will work is a matter that's being developed and will be negotiated between agreement in principle and final agreement. In addition to the sections that promise you a hunting right, there are also sections that deal with what controls are put on the government in terms of limiting the hunting right. So if the government wants to propose a conservation measure that may be necessary, there is a process that has to be followed to ensure that the conservation measure is really necessary, that the conservation measure interferes with your rights as little as possible. And if the conservation measure goes as far as actually limiting the number of animals you can harvest, how the allocation is determined is a matter that can actually be sent to arbitration to be determined. Overall, the treaty provides a clearer process for the government imposing conservation measures in a way that respects the treaty rights and actually ensures that measures are only being imposed for conservation reasons and not for other reasons unrelated to conservation. The wildlife chapter will also allow First Nation members to trade and barter wildlife with other First Nations people. So exchanges, for example, could happen for fish or for access. However, sale will not be permitted unless it's otherwise permitted under federal and provincial law. There is, however, protection for First Nation people or for Tumuk citizens who are traveling with game that they've harvested pursuant to the treaty. It makes it very clear that they are legally able to transport their game.